Red 2 standing by, all 4 lit and in the green. Welcome to the Rainbow Palace. Our first level, Beyond the Clouds, has some notoriously tough challenges, but we'll head on valiantly, and no, I didn't fall off the edge in a completely stupid fashion that was entirely my own fault. What are you talking about? Anyway, I've always loved the music for this level. It's really peaceful and serene, which actually helps quite a lot. I mean, a lot of challenging levels often tend to have very enjoyable and peaceful level themes. For example, take Forest Interlude and Sticker Bush Symphony from Donkey Kong Country 2. Beautiful, relaxing music playing in some of the game's most frustrating levels. David Wise probably did that on purpose so people wouldn't tear their hair out. And it ties back to what I was talking about with video game music in episode 9. Now, before I do get into things, I want to warn you about crystal birds, although I've been used to calling them cloud birds. Get rid of these because they will fly after you, and those lasers will destroy your very careful bomb setups. They're incredibly frustrating and I hate their guts for very good reason. Anyway, we have to start bouncing over this area. There's always that one challenge that seems to just be incredibly tough, and this is it. You'll have to get everything just right, and it can be quite tricky getting that pump bomb over there. Now imagine doing this on the Nintendo 64 and having to reset every time you screwed up. You might wind up dying a few times. As you can see, I weighed up my options, realised it was a bad idea, but we'll eventually get back there and get going. Anyway, back to what I was discussing with video game music. So after I fall to my death like an idiot again, let me tell you a tale. Video game music is always good to have when you need a bit of a mood booster. Some of those really positive and upbeat themes. Like Treasure Trove Cove in Banjo-Kazooie, it is the sound of beaches, basically. With all the proper instrumentation, you've got steel drums, gorgeous percussion, I think marimba or xylophones, and a bit of woodwind in there as well. It sounds really energetic, enthusiastic, and upbeat, but of course, setting more negative and emotional moods, like the sense of tension in Metroid Fusion's soundtrack, is brilliant as well. There's a sense of incredible dread and unease in Fusion's soundtrack, that things are just not right. You just have to listen to Sector 1's music, for example. I like the fact that there's a slightly off, heartbeat-style drum beat in there, sort of constantly pulsing in the background, ramping up the tension and telling you that things are not right. It's really, really well done. And I especially like the music for Sector 4 as well, the aquatic sector. It gives this incredible sense of unease that something is lurking in the dark. Meanwhile, I'm just taking a bit of time to think and looking down as well. That would be pretty daunting. Now, we will notice that things are cutting around a bit. So, I apologise for interrupting the beautiful music, but I will be showing you what you should do, what you shouldn't do, and all my stupid deaths along the way. Most of the time you don't really want to be hearing the music that plays when you die. I've noticed that for some reason playing Super Mario Maker that I've always felt that Super Mario World's death music feels like the game is insulting you somehow. I haven't played a lot of actual Super Mario World, but it does have a pretty good soundtrack overall, and in fact, a lot of retro games do have great soundtracks. I mean, you just have to listen to Donkey Kong Country 2, for example, and even some of the NES games had some pretty good pieces along the way that were ripe for great remixes. Because of course the Super Mario Bros. Theme has been done so many times and it's really, really enjoyable. It does work pretty well as a good jazz theme. Similarly, the Donkey Kong Country series also does a lot of really good jazz music. But I'm sort of diverting from what I was intending to have as my original point. I haven't played a lot of horror games, if I'm going to be honest, so I can't really comment on music meant to set the mood for scarier scenes. But sometimes when you get those pieces that do set the mood for more sorrowful moments, they're just incredible. Probably my favourite example would be Don't Speak Her Name from Fire Emblem Awakening. I might have mentioned it, but I absolutely refuse to play with the sound off. I usually play with the sound down to conserve battery power on the 3DS, but that level, the music is integral to the level, I feel. It helps set the emotion perfectly. You have this gorgeous sense of pain and sorrow and anger. The crazy mixture of emotions going through your head, going through Crom's head, as this shepherd's desperately trying to escape Plegia and rally to fight Gangrel's forces once again, giving him the beatdown he so richly deserves. It's an incredible scene, and it's so well driven, further by the fact that the people you're fighting don't want to be there. The general you're facing is one of the most noble adversaries you come across in the entire game. His soldiers heard Emeren's words. And that's where another great source of pain, in a sense, in the music comes from. The fact that war brings nothing but hurt and sorrow to good people who happen to be on different sides just because their leaders insist on it. It's probably one of the most emotional chapters, if not the most, since Chapter 5 in Genealogy of the Holy War. It's so incredibly done, and the music caps everything off so well. Of course, you might have noticed that my choice for sad music when I spectacularly screw up in this has been Thorn in You from Fire Emblem Fates, which is alright, but it doesn't quite convey the same emotional punch. The standard theme is fairly sad, but having the souped up battle theme doesn't quite work for me. With Don't Speak Her Name, it's the only theme that's playing throughout the entire level. It takes over everything. It perfectly conveys the emotion. They don't need to enhance it with one of the usual combat variants. It just works so well. And it's always going to be one of my favourite pieces of video game music, even though it is so incredibly sorrowful. And that is, in a way, the real strength of video game music, the ability to create memories. Good or bad? Hopefully good, because these soundtracks are part of our lives in a sense. A good video game soundtrack could be as important for people in my generation and younger as music from a lot of big bands. And yes, it might seem strange to say that, but it just goes to show how much everything has developed. We've come a very long way from the little beeps and blips of the Nintendo Entertainment System, the Commodore 64, consoles like that. Just look at, say, the difference between the NES and the Super Nintendo and everything it could do. The amazing soundtracks, as I've said, of the Donkey Kong Country trilogy. I mean, you can even see how much things have developed from, say, A Link to the Past, with its relatively simple but still memorable pieces, to Donkey Kong Country. A Link to the Past did admittedly give me one of my favourite tunes in the entire series, the Dark World theme. It's always been a joy to hear, and I was really, really happy when playing A Link Between Worlds and the theme started up at the right point in the game. It's just like you knew, at least I knew anyway, that I was home, that this was going to live up to A Link to the Past while managing to be its own thing as well. Now, I do like A Link Between Worlds a lot. I admit that it's maybe not as groundbreaking as A Link to the Past was, but it has so many great memories, and it's actually another good example of variations on a theme, because all the dungeon themes are essentially the same. They have basically the same little motif as such, but they're adapted differently. There's... I can't exactly describe it properly, but the music in the Ice Ruins has this almost crystalline sound to it. It's a lot of classic ice level themes and that sort of instrumentation. Also, we're coming up to a little demonstration on how to get to that switch, or maybe how not to get that switch, because I botched a few things. So, back to what I was saying. Apart from the percussion used for the Ice Palace, you have slightly exotic flair used for things like Turtle Rock and the Desert Palace. Very ominous sounds used for the Palace of Darkness. And you also have this really nice string setup for the Thieves' Hideout, which really ramps up the tension. Skull Woods also has a very ominous sound to it as well. It's all very well crafted. Worth noting, don't push the control stick forward very much during this section. And that's how you'll get out. Well, part of it anyway. There's also a custom part over here. Make sure to grab that if you want, the other one's a pain in the backside. So, of course, getting out still requires some bomb jumping. Not falling off the edge. But if I can quickly divert, I want to talk about that one enemy. You know, those really frustrating ones like the Golbats you keep winding up running into, or the really bothersome enemies. I don't know what would be the most frustrating ones in Breath of the Wild, for example. Lizalfos are pretty bothersome because they're very agile. But either way, most games have that one enemy that will provide something frustrating. Let's say the Malbra in the Final Fantasy games and all the status conditions it jams on you. Crystal birds are that one enemy in this game. You can get stuck because these crystal birds fly above what you're doing. Now, if I'd had that bomb a little closer to me, I was out of there. But as you can see, they effortlessly destroy your formations. Everything I warned you about, and they will constantly follow you. It's really, really bothersome trying to get out of this area if one of these decides it's going to home in on you and start shooting lasers. You can't do anything about it. So I pretty much had to just live with it and restart. Now, even when we're not being plagued by birds, this level can still be a pain in the backside to complete. It requires the sort of mathematical exactitude, placing the bombs just so that it would make your geometry teacher very happy. I actually nearly said geography teacher at one point. So yeah, you can get stuck trying to get out, but even if you do, you can still do something stupid. All I can say is this is probably the very definition of epic fail, and I'm still kind of embarrassed. And I have no idea how I managed to do that. I can't blame the controller. I've said that yes, the Wii U's controller is more finicky and sensitive than a Nintendo 64 controller, but I can't blame the controller. That was all me, and that was incredibly stupid. But we finally do get out of the place. And I'm going to change topic to talk about difficulty for a little bit. Because, in fairness, Rainbow Palace is tough. You require a lot of precision to get through it, but when you pull it off, it's beautiful. You feel really good because you've learned a lot more about the game. You've started to learn these new techniques that really improve your ability to play, and it makes you happier when you do eventually get there, even through all the little trials and tribulations. But it's that sense of difficulty, the fact that you can overcome all those challenges, that I really like. It's part of why I like the Etrian Odyssey games, because they encourage you to get better at the game, and you're rewarded when you do actually make those intelligent plays, get those class combinations that can break things wide open. It's also why I like the F-Zero series. Yes, it had some of the same handling problems that Mario Kart did early on, and yes, GX is stupidly hard. But I can say that I've at least done some work on Master Mode on this. Not as much experience with the Story Mode, but my experiences with Master Mode, trying to get the character videos, I got a little better each time. The first time I got a character video, my brother did most of the work. He is much better at racing games than I am. The first time I got a character video, my favourite racer, the Skull, I didn't win a single race, but I used my knowledge of the tracks that I'd been building up after a few failures to work out where the best place to attack my rivals was and who the main rivals in each race were going to be. I built on that constantly with other characters and earned a few videos along the way. And the game didn't have any problem with this. It rewarded me for getting better by showing what my improvement would be like. The reason I hate Mario Kart so much is that I feel the game actively conspires against you when you try and get better at the game. Yes, you can get better at the game and it will eventually reward you for it, but so many times, I can cite from personal experience playing the Star Cup on 150cc in Mario Kart 7. It took me over 100 tries because the game kept dropping me down pits with lightning bolts and blue shells and things like that. And all its arbitrary requirements, it didn't want to satisfy. It's like the game was keeping me from achieving things, and it was a sense of, thank God, finally, when I eventually did get it. Rather than, yes, I've done it, I've got better at the game. Ranting over, let's take a look at the Rainbow Palace boss, Spellmaker. There are some interesting little tidbits if you're paying attention. Spellmaker is quite a nicely designed boss. You won't actually get remote bombs for this fight. Sirius isn't around to give them to you, obviously. Pay attention to the tarot cards Spellmaker uses. Spellmaker's 8 attacks are based on the major arcana of the tarot. The moon, number 18, has him drop fists on you. The devil, number 15, is the shadowy hand you can bomb to get a gold card. The sword, number 11, represents justice in the Rider-Waite deck. It's the explosive card. The scythes, 13, represents death, the green slashing attack. The staff and animals represent the world, number 21. You'll see the planet and stars will drop and stun you. The sun, number 19, has the fiery dragon chase you. The heart for number 6, the lovers, has him drop items, but he will take away that freebie gold card if you pick up one of them. Be careful. The only one we did not see was the star, number 17. This summons a giant foot which squashes you. It's fairly rarely used. In order to get all the gold cards against Spellmaker, you'll get that freebie. You have to bomb the shadowy hand from card 15. You'll have to burn his cape and his hat. This can be incredibly finicky, but with the right timing and manipulating his movement, you'll be able to do it very easily. It's part of why you don't get remote bombs in all fairness, because this would make things a bit less challenging. And of course, as you've seen, Spellmaker can chain his attacks, so be very careful about that. Target his shadow to make sure you damage him and stop that admittedly annoying laughter. Of course, with a bit of practice, it's easy to make him laugh on the other side of his face. Not exactly sure why people have that saying. But in all fairness, you can see that this is actually a very creative boss. But it's worth noting that his appearance is somewhat spoiled. You'll actually see him on the side of the box for the game. I do kind of miss that level of detail on Nintendo 64 boxes. It was really fun, a nice unique touch. And it helped that the big clunky cartridges meant you had more space for those really neat designs. But basically, stay on your toes, watch the tells for all the attacks, and you can take down this rather interesting boss pretty easily. Note there will be certain fluctuations in how many of those fists he drops on you. And as you can see, it's fairly easy to manipulate his movement, but if you get him at the right time, you can actually burn his hat and his cape in one go. That was what saved this run for me. And there we are, that's all the gold cards, and don't touch those items, as I said. With a little bit more timing, we finally managed to bring him down. He's trying to use that attack again, and he walks straight back into our bomb. Note that there is a skull item, which I discussed, but that is part of multiplayer. That will hopefully come later. And there we are. After many trials and tribulations, we have made it through the first 2 stages of the Rainbow Palace. The last stage and the final battle await. As always, thank you very much for joining me and listening to me monologuing. Until next time, this is Red 2, returning to base and wishing you all the best.